I will never forget the violence of the white mob when we left our home. I still see black men being shot, black bodies lying in the street. I still smell smoke and see fire. I still see black businesses being burned. I still hear airplanes flying overhead. I hear the screams. I have lived through the massacre every day. Our country may forget this history, but I cannot. I will not, and other survivors do not, and our descendants do not.
Wow, that was 107-year-old Viola Fletcher remembering and sharing her memories of one of the worst acts of racial violence in American history, the Tulsa Race Massacre. 1 century ago, an angry white mob attacked Tulsa, Oklahoma's Greenwood district. It was also known at the time as Black Wall Street. They burned businesses to the ground and murdered as many as 300 black Tulsans. Marking a significant milestone in the country's long overdue racial reckoning, President Biden will travel to Tulsa on Tuesday for the 100th anniversary of the massacre, emphasizing his push to recognize some of the most difficult moments in our country's history and help advance social justice. Yet concerns of racially motivated violence remain today. In a memo today, the Department of Homeland Security warned that that commemoration and the events around them in Tulsa could become targets for attacks. While the warning is not based on a specific or credible threat, DHS says that the events, quote, probably are attractive targets for some racially or ethnically motivated violent extremist white supremacists to commit violence. Joining us now, the Reverend Al Sharpton, host of MSNBC's Politics Nation and president of the National Action Network. Olivia Choi is back with us. Rev, you and I think, were on together when the last president used a trip to Tulsa in a very different way. This trip seems to be punctuated now by this Homeland Security warning of a heightened risk of domestic violent extremism.
Yes, we were on together. In fact, it was last year when Donald Trump was going to Tulsa to have a rally at the beginning of what is Juneteenth, where they celebrate when people in Texas were finally freed of slavery. And I had gone in with the Juneteenth committee to speak the night before Trump's rally. That was the rally many believed later caused COVID-19 to take Herman Cain from us because they famously did not socially distance. Now we have this president going to salute and commemorate those that survived in Tulsa and those that died in the worst race riot in history that wiped out the richest community of blacks in the history of the country at that time. So the difference between a year ago and now, and the difference between how one deals with racism and the policies around racism. The President Biden will be going a week after meeting with George Floyd's family and talking to some of us. I spoke with him at length on the phone about some of the kind of legislation we need. You couldn't have a more clear contrast between presidents and presidency than if you gauge last June and this June in terms of where a president deals with Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yamiche mentioned on this program, on the occasion that President Biden was meeting with the Floyd family, that on the right, there is this bizarre sort of cultural backlash around not re-educating people, but looking clearly at some of the most heinous racial violence, which is obviously where Tulsa stands in our history books. President Biden seems undeterred, unmolested, maybe even unaware of what is going on. I doubt unaware. But what do you make of sort of his leadership on these issues, and where would you like to see him spend more attention and time?
Well, I think that his leadership has shown so far a sensitivity and a hands-on kind of approach. And I think that what we'd like to see is to move forward in a way where we understand he wants to reach out. We understand the desire for bipartisanship. But at some point, I think we're just going to have to move the George Floyd bill and other bills forward by dealing with this filibuster, because we cannot allow this to stand in the way of progress. And I hope to see the president get to the point where he can say the filibuster can no longer be durable because we have to deal with policing, we have to dealing with the voting rights, whether it's Senate Bill 1 or the John Lewis bill coming through the House. I think that there has to be a time that we're saying that reaching out has gone long enough. It seems interesting to me that some of the Republicans that took shots at the president meeting with the Floyd family are the same kinds of Republicans that rejected hearing from the families of Capitol Police that were killed during the insurrection. So when you're dealing with people that don't want to see the families of police victims being treated humanely and ignore the pleas of victims of Capitol Police killings by a mob, you have to wonder where their moral compass is.
Well, I don't know about the moral compass, but the political compass, Olivia, is dialed in with what they now see as a part of the coalition they can't defend, white supremacists. And I was chilled to see this Homeland Security warning today that and one of the events was canceled, that the commemoration of the massacre in Tulsa is a potential possible target for domestic violent extremists. But when you see one party failing to do anything about the conduct on 1/6, I guess they feel emboldened. Do you expect more warnings like the one we got today?
I do. And to be honest, I'm grateful that we have leadership in place in the Homeland Security apparatus and the national security apparatus now and in the White House that will allow the truthful warnings to come out like this, that call it for what it is, that they can say white supremacy, because I know firsthand that this was something that we struggled with in the past 4 years, where this was not allowed to put out a stark warning like this. And they need to, because it's important. People need to be vigilant. They know that, if for them to put out a threat bulletin like this means that there are threat streams out there and that we need to be paying attention, and that they're working with local and state and local law enforcement, because it is a partnership. It's a partnership with citizens and it's a partnership with them. And I think it's just appalling that we have people in the Republican Party and leadership and who are in elected office. And we talked about this a little earlier, but the Matt Gaetz of the world, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, they're the ones who have the power right now on the Republican side of the House. And that is dangerous because they speak with rhetoric that promotes violence and attacks like this. And I am concerned about what will happen in the next few days. And I hope that, there'll be high law enforcement and security, which, under President Biden, I will go as far as to say this: thank goodness that he is in office, because the right security parameters will be in place